I was reading a book called Braided Sweetgrass recently, and I came across this greeting that evidently the Indigenous people would say it would be recited at the start of a gathering, a meeting, maybe even a club setting. And it wouldn't necessarily all be read. It is quite lengthy, but there might be sections perhaps applicable to what they were talking about. But I thought it would be a good one to share with you. Greetings to the natural world. Today we have gathered and we see that the cycles of life continue. We have been given the duty to live in balance and harmony with each other and all living things. So now we bring our minds together as one, as we give greetings and thanks to each other as people. Now our minds are one. We are all thankful to our mother, the earth, for she gives us all that we need for life. She supports our feet as we walk about upon her. It gives us joy that she continues to care for us as she has from the beginning of time. To our mother, we send greetings and thanks. Now our minds are one.
Good morning, everybody. Today is National Indigenous Peoples Day, and I think that's a really important day, period, but especially for the church. I'm going to read, this video is not really about me. This video is about Nicole and Kathy and Heather and some of the things we're doing around the church to recognize our history and some of the things that we should, well, anyway, you'll see more about that in a minute. But I want to take a minute and put things in perspective theologically and biblically. So I'm going to read this section from Matthew, and I think it'll be very familiar. I think it's really important. It really sums up the gospel in a few sentences to me. You've heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you, do not resist an evildoer. If anyone strikes you on the right cheek, turn the other cheek also. And if anyone wants to sue you and take your coat, give your cloak as well. And if anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go also the 2nd mile. Give to everyone who begs from you, and do not refuse anyone who wants to borrow from you. To me, the beauty of the gospel is this message that we can do things differently. Human nature, when we've been hit, is to hit back. And what that does is it adds injustice, it adds violence to the cycle. Even if we're punching for justice, which I recognize as an oxymoron, then we're creating other problems, and we'll just flip from one problem to the next to the next. What we just read in Matthew here, and really I think the gospel message, period, tells us how to end that cycle. It is an incredibly heavy burden. It is one that people fall short of every day. But it gives us something to aspire to. Very important passage. Now I'm going to read you another one. Again, a very familiar passage, and I want you to think about the dissonance. Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. When they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. And Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. And here's the key. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything that I have commanded you. And remember, I am with you always to the end of the age. If we interpret that passage the traditional way, and that is with our colonial lens and our, generally speaking, white European descendant lens, I think the operative word becomes make. Go out and make disciples of all nations force. I think the way we are tempted to read that is that because we have this in our hand, we must be right. And it gives us permission to go in with a sense of privilege and superiority. And I think particularly in the middle of the Industrial Revolution and the age of exploration, it really colored people from seeing the bit about turning the other cheek. Because I think it's very important that we're an evangelistic religion. We believe that other people need to hear what we have to say, and we believe that the world will be better if more people are Christians. But we have to ask why, because the human nature says that, the more people that are on our side, the better. And I think that's what we hear a lot when we think about evangelism. But when I look at that bit from Matthew 5 about turning the other cheek, I think, oh my God, this is a message that we need to be taking to everybody. This is a message that would be a crime to keep to ourselves. And that's why we're making disciples of all nations. The problem is, if you force that, like how do you show strength through vulnerability while holding a giant stick? And that's what happened when we landed on Canada's shores. We showed up with this beautiful message of turning the other cheek, this world transforming message that we could not come up with on our own and we need. And we did it ready to hit. We came as oppressors with a message for the oppressed. To be clear, the Indigenous people weren't oppressed. I think they were probably just fine the way they were. But anyway. So I think today we're going to take a minute to just be in solidarity, recognize our role in what's happened, and just sit with this. Nicole says it really well later on in the video, and that is that we thought we were helping. We clearly were not. There is no doubt about it at this point that we were not helping. But we thought we were. And I think that's what makes it so problematic and so difficult is, this 150 years ago, that was mission. And today we're having to take our colonial glasses off and take another look at mission and decide what mission is. I don't know if it jumped out at you guys, but I called this day National Indigenous Peoples Day. You may be more familiar with National Aboriginal Peoples Day. And I know for a lot of people, sort of the constant changing of names and things like that we experience here in Canada is frustrating and exasperating. But I think today it's such a good example of what we're talking about, because the reason it's called National Indigenous Peoples Day instead of National Aboriginal Peoples Day is because we asked. Indigenous and Aboriginal, I'm not even sure what the connotations are. But the point is, we changed the name because we went to Indigenous people and we said, what do you want us to call it? That's an example of something we haven't done, and that's the problem. We need to ask. We need to build relationships. Christianity is a very relational religion. Our main symbol is sitting around the dinner table with God incarnate. It's a very relational religion. And again, with Indigenous people, we weren't relational. And so I pray that going forward, we are relational. that we continue preaching this message of freedom for the oppressed and justice, while recognizing that by and large, we're the people on top, we're the people in power, and that we figure out a way to move forward with integrity and respect and love. Amen.
The Heart Garden here of St. Andrews in Tweed symbolizes the memory of First Nation children who were taken away from their families, their heritage, their traditions, and their native language. The children were forced to attend residential schools. The Europeans who were building a new colony were trying to assimilate these innocent indigenous children. They were forcing the children to use their English or French languages and leave behind their native lives. The Europeans thought they were doing something favorable for the First Nation people, but they weren't. The First Nation was seen as barbarians, as something to get rid of. In order to develop a new colony in the European way, this anthropocentric perception destroyed the First Nation people, their language, and their history. Stereotypes, criticisms, and terrible attitudes developed, which led to abuse and neglect, and abandonment of indigenous people. They have been stigmatized into a war that continues this day and keeps indigenous people on the margins, outside of society. The Heart Garden demonstrated the people of Tweed are standing with the First Nations. We are dedicated this garden to the lives, language, and love that was lost. The Heart Garden will remind us of history and the value of all lives. Every child matters. Let us continue to talk about inequalities in society and how we, St. Andrews, can put our words into action. Let us develop a strong community, and that includes all people, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, together. Thank you. Hello, congregation. I am now referring the 3 plants to sisters. One sister is the eldest, and she creates the foundation for the middle sister to twist, which also gives the support. The other third sister spreads her arms out as an umbrella that shades the other 2 plants. And that was 3 sisters that we have planted in this Heart Garden. Thank you.